The day my grandmother's estate was divided, my mother stood at the head of the conference table and smiled at me like I was a stranger. She was being polite too. Not her daughter. Not the one who had spent every Saturday for 3 years driving Grandma Ellie's to her chemo appointments. Just a stranger. My name is Tara, and this is the story of how I lost everything in that room and then got it all back. I should back up. My grandmother. Everyone called her Grandma Eloise. Even people who weren't related to her. Was the kind of woman who kept a notepad by the stove to write down recipe adjustments in real time. She wore the same pearl earrings every day of my life until she couldn't put them on herself anymore. And then I put them on for her. She smelled like ivory soap and the lavender sachets she kept in every drawer of her house in Asheville, North Carolina. She was the only person in my family who ever asked me what I actually wanted. My mom is the oldest of 2 daughters. My aunt, my mom's younger sister, lives 40 minutes away in a house that my grandmother helped pay for back in 2014. Her name is Nadine, and she has always been my mother's shadow, her echo, her yes woman. Whatever my mother said, Nadine agreed with. Whatever my mother decided, Nadine supported. It had been that way since they were children, from what Grandma Eloise once told me, quietly, when we were sitting on her back porch shelling butter beans. "Your mother needs to be the one in charge," Grandma Eloise had said, not unkindly. Always had said, not unkindly. Always has. Nadine lets her. That's their arrangement. "And what's your arrangement with her?" I'd asked. She'd smiled and kept shelling. "I love her, that's more complicated. My mom. I'll just call her my mom because that's what she is, even when she acts like she isn't. Works in real estate in Charlotte. She's good at it. She has the voice for it. Warm and certain. The kind of voice that makes people feel like they're the only person in the room. Growing up, I watched her use that voice on clients, on neighbors, on my dad. Before he left. On me. She could make you feel chosen, and then 2 minutes later you'd realize you'd agreed to something you never intended to agree to. My dad left when I was 11. That's a whole other story, and not this one. After he left, it was me, my mom, and my older brother, Cole. Cole is 4 years older than me, which meant by the time I was figuring out how to be in high school, he was already in college in Raleigh, gone, sending funny texts and showing up at Christmas with gas station wine. I don't blame him for leaving. I understand it now, but at the time it felt like everyone was evacuating a building only I still lived in. So, I became the responsible one by default. I made my own lunches. I kept my grades up without anyone checking. I got a job at 16 hostessing at an Italian place on Central Avenue, and opened my own savings account because my mom would sometimes pull from the joint one we had without mentioning it first. I didn't make a big deal out of it, I just adjusted. My grandmother noticed. She was the only one who did. When I got into UNC Charlotte, she sent me a card with a $50 bill in it and a note that said, "You've been doing hard things quietly for a long time. This is just the beginning of what you'll build." I still have that card in a shoebox under my bed. The $50 went toward textbooks. I studied accounting. Not because I loved numbers. I mean, I do. But that's not why. I studied it because I wanted to understand money. How it moves. Who controls it. What happens when someone decides you don't get any. After graduation, I got a job at a mid-sized firm in Charlotte, moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in Noda, and built a life that was quiet and stable and completely mine. I made around $58,000 a year. Not rich, not struggling. I had a cat named Biscuit and a standing Sunday call with Grandma Eloise and a small group of friends from work who I trusted. My mom and I had what I'd call a managed relationship. I called her on her birthday. I showed up for holidays. I didn't bring up old wounds, and she didn't acknowledge they existed. It worked, in the way that a screen door works. It keeps most things out, but you can still feel the wind. The thing that changed everything was Grandma Elise's diagnosis. Stage 3 ovarian cancer. Spring of 2022, she was 78. My mom's response was to research the best facilities and make a lot of phone calls with a lot of authority. Nadine's response was to cry on those phone calls and agree with whatever my mom said. My brother Cole's response was to say he'd figure out how to come down more. He didn't. And send a very nice flower arrangement. My response was to drive to Asheville the following weekend and ask Grandma Eloise what she needed. She needed someone to go with her to appointments because the chemo made her dizzy and she didn't trust herself to drive. She needed someone to manage her medications because there were 7 of them and the schedule was genuinely complicated. She needed someone to sit with her on the hard days when she was too tired to watch TV and too awake to sleep, and just wanted company. I moved my remote work schedule to start at 7 so I could leave by 3. Every Saturday I drove the 2 hours to Asheville and spent the weekend. I brought food she could actually keep down: plain rice, soft scrambled eggs, the ginger tea she liked. I organized her pill case every Sunday before I left. I talked to her doctors and took notes and sent summaries to my mom because she asked me to. My mom came 4 times in 18 months. 4 times. She always had listings, she always had clients, she always had something. Nadine came twice. Both times she cried so much that Grandma Eloise ended up comforting her. I'm not saying this to make myself sound like a martyr. I'm saying it because it's what happened, and because later, when everything came out, I wanted to be clear about what the baseline was. Grandma Eloise and I talked about everything during those 18 months. About my dad, about money, about what she was afraid of and what she wasn't. She told me she wasn't afraid of dying. She'd made her peace with that early in treatment. What she was afraid of was the mess it would leave behind. Your mother is going to want to manage everything, she told me once, around month 8. She was in the recliner by the window, a blanket over her lap, looking at the mountains. I've made arrangements, I want you to know that. You don't have to tell me anything, Grandma. I know I don't. She looked at me. I want you to be prepared. That's different. I didn't push her, she didn't explain. I filed it away. She passed in November. Quiet, at home, in that recliner by the window. I was there. My mom made it in time to say goodbye. I had called her the morning I knew. And Cole flew in from Austin that night. Nadine was in the next room. We were all there when she went, and for about 6 hours after, we were actually kind to each other. Grief can do that. Give you a window. The window closed at the estate attorney's office 3 weeks later. His name was Mr. Calloway. He had an office on Merriman Avenue, very tidy, with framed botanical prints on the walls. There were 4 of us, my mom, Nadine, Cole, and me. My mom had brought a legal pad. She sat at the corner of the table closest to Mr. Calloway, like she was positioning herself to be next in line for something. The early parts of the will were unremarkable. Some furniture went to Nadine, who had always loved Grandma Eloise's dining set. The car went to a neighbor who had mowed the lawn for free for years. There was a small, charitable gift to the church. Cole and I were each left a piece of jewelry, a watch for him, the pearl earrings for me. Then Mr. Calloway said, "Now, regarding the remainder of the estate." My mom straightened in her chair. The house in Asheville was appraised at $340,000. There were also liquid assets, savings and a small investment account, totaling just over $190,000. Grandma Eloise had lived simply, but she had been careful. Mr. Calloway read the allocation. My mother received 20%. Nadine received 20%. Nadine received 20%. Cole received 10%. I received 50%. My mother stopped breathing. I watched it happen. The pause, the stillness, the moment before the storm. "There must be a mistake," she said. Her voice was still smooth, but there was something under it, the way water sounds different when there's ice beneath the surface. Mr. Calloway said there was no mistake. The will had been drafted 14 months earlier and reviewed and confirmed 8 months after that during a period when Grandma Eloise was fully lucid and under no external pressure. He had documentation. My mother turned to me. "Did you know about this?" "No," I said. That was true. I had known something was arranged. I hadn't known the specifics. "You were up here every weekend," she said. "You had access to her. You influenced her." That word, influenced, sat in the middle of the table like a lit match. I kept my voice even. I drove her to chemo. We could have hired someone for that. Cole looked at the wall. Nadine was already crying. My mom's legal pad stayed blank. She hadn't written anything down because she hadn't expected to need to. She'd expected to leave with what she assumed was already hers. I want to be honest about what the next few weeks were like because it wasn't clean. My mom called me 4 times in the first 3 days. The call started as questions. How long did you know? Did she say why? What exactly did you two talk about? And moved into accusations, then what I can only describe as a kind of pressure campaign. She'd spoken to a probate attorney, she told me. Undue influence was a legal claim. She had grounds. The thing is, I knew enough about estate law to know she wasn't entirely wrong. Undue influence is real, and courts take it seriously, and proximity to a testator counts as a factor. I also knew that Grandma Elias had been methodical. The phrase, fully lucid and under no external pressure in Mr. Doe was external. Calloway's notes wasn't accidental. Still, I was scared. I called my own attorney, a woman named Ms. Okafor, who my firm had referred to me once for a contract issue. I explained the situation. She listened without interrupting. Do you have any documentation of your caregiving? She asked. I had the mileage logs. I'd kept them for tax purposes because I'd consulted with a CPA friend about whether caregiver mileage could be deducted for a family member. I had receipts. Gas, groceries, the pharmacy, the medical supply store where I'd bought the pill organizer and the shower bench. I had the text messages where my mom had asked me to send her medical updates, and I'd sent them, dated, detailed. I had the emails I'd sent to the oncology team, because they'd required a designated family contact, and my mom had asked me to be that contact so she didn't have to deal with appointment scheduling. Ms. Okafor said, let's see what they file. My mom filed. What she filed was a petition to contest the will on the grounds of undue influence, with a secondary claim that Grandma Elias had lacked testamentary capacity in the months before her death due to her illness and the medications she was taking. The capacity claim, Ms. Okafor told me, was going to be the harder one to watch. Not because it would succeed, the records were too clean, but because it meant people sitting in a courtroom arguing about whether my grandmother had been in her right mind, whether her love and her choices and her careful planning could be dismissed as the confusion of a sick woman. That made me angrier than any of the rest of it. What I didn't know, what none of us knew until Mr. Calloway contacted Miss Frand, Okafor directly, was that Grandma Eloise had left something else. A letter. And a recording. Mr. Calloway had been instructed to hold both until and unless the will was contested. It was, he explained to Ms. Okafor, his client's contingency. She had not assumed her family would challenge her wishes, but she had prepared for it. The letter was 4 pages, handwritten, dated 14 months before she passed. It addressed every member of the family by name. It explained her reasoning. It documented, in her own words, in her own handwriting, what she had observed over the previous decade, who had visited and when. Who had helped manage her affairs after her husband died. Who had asked about her health, and who had asked about her house. She wrote with the precision of a woman who had been paying attention her entire life and was making sure the record reflected that. She also wrote, I am not punishing anyone. I am honoring someone who showed up. There is a difference, and I need my family to sit with that difference even if it is uncomfortable. The recording was made on the same day as the final will review, with Mr. Calloway present. She had insisted on it. 22 minutes of Grandma Elias in her own voice, answering questions about her mental state, her intentions, her understanding of the assets and how she was distributing them. She got 3 of the questions wrong on purpose, Mr. Calloway later told Ms. Bear. Okafor, trivial ones, about the exact square footage of the house. To demonstrate that knowing she didn't know everything didn't mean she didn't know her own mind. I am not confused about my granddaughter, she said on the recording. I am not confused about what she has given. I am choosing, clearly and completely, to reflect that. I heard that recording for the first time in a conference room in Asheville, sitting across from Mr. Calloway and Ms. Okafor. and I had to look at the ceiling for a while before I could say anything. The case didn't go to trial. When my mother's attorney received the letter and the recording in discovery, he advised her to settle. That's the word that got used, in the clinical language of legal proceedings, settle. What it meant in practice was that my mother withdrew the contest. The will stood as written. What it meant in the space between me and her is something I'm still working out. She didn't call after the withdrawal. Neither did Nadine. Cole sent me a text that said, "I'm sorry this got so ugly. She was wrong to do it." I texted back a thumbs up because I didn't know what else to say. We talked on the phone a week later and he apologized more properly, and I accepted it because Cole is not the villain of this story, and I think he knows that. And the guilt of not being more present was already its own consequence for him. My mother and I have not spoken since the filing was withdrawn. That's been 8 months. I'm not sure what I want that to look like going forward. I've thought about it a lot. On the drives back from Asheville, while I'm updating the spreadsheet I use to manage the estate accounting. While Biscuit sits on my lap and stares at me with his weird cat conviction that everything is fine, I've thought about forgiveness and whether it requires contact. I've thought about what my grandmother would want and whether I'm allowed to use that as a compass, or whether that's just a way of avoiding my own feelings. I don't have neat answers. What I do have is the house. I spent 2 weekends cleaning it out after the legal process completed. I kept the kitchen table, the lavender sachets, her notepad from by the stove with adjustments in her handwriting, more lemon next time, less butter, Tara likes it brighter. I kept the recliner by the window even though it's too big for my apartment. It's in storage. I'm not ready to do anything with it yet. The house is rented out for now, through a property management company. The rental income covers the property taxes and maintenance and puts a small amount into a savings account every month. The investment account is sitting untouched. I met with a fee-only financial planner, someone with no stake in what I decide, and she helped me understand my options. Nothing is finalized. I'm in no hurry. What I do every Sunday is still make the call. I pick up the phone at the time we always talked, and I don't dial anyone, and I sit with it for a few minutes. It's not sad, exactly. It's more like a habit that became a ritual, and I'm not ready to let the ritual go. Grandma Elise used to say that the point of making something carefully is so it lasts. She said it about pie crust mostly, but I think she meant it about more than that. She made her arrangements carefully. She was right that I needed to be prepared. I am learning to be. And Biscuit, for whatever it's worth, has no notes. I've thought a lot about why my mother did what she did. Not to excuse it. I'm past needing to do that, but because I think understanding it matters more than being angry about it. She saw my grandmother's estate and she saw something she believed was already hers. Not because she'd earned it. Because she was the oldest. Because she'd always been in charge. Because in her mind, being the one who makes the decisions and being the one who does the work were the same thing. They never were. She just never had to feel the difference until that conference room. That's the thing about showing up quietly for a long time. Nobody notices. Until suddenly it's the only thing that matters. I didn't set out to earn anything from Grandma Eloise. I want to be honest about that. I drove to Asheville because she needed someone to drive her and I was the one who could. I organized her medications because the schedule was genuinely confusing and someone had to do it. I stayed on the hard weekends because leaving felt wrong. Not because I was thinking about what came after. If I'd been doing it for what I might receive, I think she would have known. She was sharp that way. She noticed everything. What I've come to understand is that integrity isn't a strategy. It's not something you perform so that good things happen to you later. It's the thing you do when no one is watching and nothing is guaranteed. My mom hired a probate attorney. She builds a case. She argued in legal filings that her own mother hadn't been in her right mind, and she did it while I was still grieving, still driving back from Asheville on weekends to sort through a life. That's a choice. It reveals something. And the letter Grandma Eloise left, those 4 handwritten pages. That also reveals something. It reveals that a person who pays attention, who lives with honesty, who notices what others choose not to see, leaves a mark that outlasts them. She didn't write that letter to punish my mother. She said so herself. She wrote it because she had spent a lifetime watching people take credit for proximity without doing the work of presence, and she was not going to let that be the final word. I think about that when things feel hard. Not the inheritance, the letter. The fact that she sat down and wrote 4 careful pages so that the truth would have a voice even after she was gone. That's a kind of wisdom I'm still learning. The idea that you can build something so solid, so clearly true, that even people who want to tear it down can't find the seam. Grandma Eloise called it making something carefully so it lasts. I used to think she meant pie crust. Now I think she meant everything. The choices you make, the people you show up for, the record you leave of who you actually were. None of that requires an audience. It just requires you to keep going. I'm still going.